The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 51. The Clash and the Classified. Harry Potter stood across the great hall from the Dark Lord, the round discs of his glasses reflecting the luminous candlelight above. "I don't want anyone else to try to help. It's got to be like this. It's got to be me," Potter called to the crowd, which had startled at his sudden appearance. It was the latest in a series of shocks for everyone. Finding Dumbledore to be alive had been confounding for many. Seeing Sirius Black roaming free and apparently in a relationship with a mystery man had been highly surprising. And just now, witnessing Lucius Malfoy kill a vicious werewolf to protect a Muggle had been more than slightly mind-boggling. To see Harry Potter alive and ready to take on Lord Voldemort again was just another stupefaction amongst many. Potter and Riddle, now both as close to mortals as one might imagine, faced off again against each other as the crowd grew silent. Richard drew Linda into his embrace and flitted his eyes to check on their daughter nearby. Hermione and Draco held hands as Hermione's tears tracked down her cheeks in worry for her friend. Lucius had pulled Narcissa close to him, as nearby Lobo did the same with Tonks. To his slight surprise, his two Fixer-Elixir business partners, Sirius and Quentin, held hands as they looked on fearfully at the standoff. Good for them, he thought. The two men appeared to be standing at the bedside of the potions master, Snape. The hook-nosed professor was heavily bandaged, but was sitting up, and happened to look at Richard as Richard looked at him. Snape sneered at him briefly, then looked back at Potter and the Dark Lord. As Richard's eyes continued to travel the room, they landed upon the piercing gaze of Vulture. She nodded knowingly at him, recognizing him. He nodded back with the tightest of smiles. Then both agents shifted their gazes back to Voldemort and Potter. By now, the lidocaine was beginning to wear off enough that the older wizard could be generally understood again, albeit with a bit of difficulty.
"You, the boy who survived by accident because Dumbledore was pulling the strings,"
Voldemort sneered. Several heads in the room turned to look at Dumbledore now, who stood in the corner of the room with a man who looked a lot like him, as well as Minerva and the healer who'd helped him with debridement all those months before. After a moment, Voldemort seemed to see what they were seeing, and stumbled a bit in surprise.
"No!"
"Afraid so," Potter said. "He's still here, just like I am. Was it an accident that I didn't defend myself tonight, and still survived, and returned to fight again?"
"Accidents!" Voldemort sneered at him. "Accidents and chance!"
"You don't learn from your mistakes, Riddle, do you?" Potter asked.
"You dare!"
It was Potter's turn to sneer. "Yes, I dare. I know things you don't, Tom Riddle. I know lots of important things that you don't. Want to hear some before you make another big mistake?"
"Is it love again? Dumbledore's favorite solution, love, which he claimed conquered death?"
Voldemort scoffed. "It was the love of Dumbledore's friends that saved him, and love from my mother that saved me all those years ago." Voldemort huffed in amusement.
"I have it on very good authority that love means nothing."
Potter replied, "Love means everything, Tom." With an iron grip, the young scar-faced wizard raised his wand even higher, pointing it directly at the Dark Lord's chest. 2 spells were cast. 2 voices rang out in the silence. 2 jets of light arced into the space above the crowd.
Avada Kedavra!
Expelliarmus! The spells collided in midair, the red streak from Potter's wand mixing and blending with the green streak from Voldemort's. Each stream of light adjusted to a golden hue, and before anyone could realize it, more streams of golden light burst and flowed from the center above them. The light streaks formed a cage around the 2 wizards, reminiscent of the one that Voldemort had used to protect Nagini. Harry strained with the effort to maintain the connection, both of his hands gripping hard around the wand of holly and phoenix feather. Meanwhile, Voldemort, who had always struggled to maintain connections of any sort, seemed to be trying his level best to overpower the younger wizard. He grinned maniacally, lifting the fingers of his left wand in the air to magically summon his second wand from his inner pocket. His flinty stare settled on Potter, as if to say, "Try and stop me now that I've got 2 wands working against you." But Potter only grinned wider, in hardened amusement. He focused on pushing against the Dark Wizard with all his might, forcing his power, his love for the people around him, back at Riddle. It was too much for the wand of Yew, and for the wand of MacDonald's. With a blast, Voldemort was knocked from his feet. The Yew wand was forced from his clutches and went sailing end over end to its new master, the owner of its twin core, Harry Potter. Voldemort fell back as though dead, clutching at what would be his final straw. A great cheer went up, and a clamour of voices and hands pelted Harry from all sides. Friends clapped him on the back and kissed his cheeks or caressed his hair. The handful of remaining Death Eaters cowed together, subdued by Flitwick, Hagrid, Shacklebolt, the Weasleys, and McGonagall. And Richard Granger was hurrying to the side of his presumably deceased, supposed cousin, Tom Riddle. He was closely shadowed by Linda and the Malfoys. As he crossed the room, he made brief eye contact with the other 3 current and former members of MI6 in the vicinity.
"Is he dead?"
Richard heard Lucius ask their wives behind them.
"I don't know, but I have a feeling if he isn't, he will be soon,"
Richard heard Narcissa murmur behind him. Too right, he thought. The 4 of them reached the prone body, and Richard put his fingers on the grey neck of the man formerly known as Lord Voldemort. After a moment he located a pulse, thready and erratic, but there. The man, or whatever he was, still lived, tied to his earthly body by none other than the existence of the boy across the room, who was being lauded for his death. The force of the curse had merely pushed Voldemort backwards, knocking him unconscious. Looking up furtively at Tonks, Lobo, and Vulture, he gave the smallest of head shakes, followed by a discreet hand signal, 2 fingers held down loosely at his side. It was a signal left over from their intelligence days that simply meant, "On to Plan B." "I need you to levitate him, quickly, somewhere else. Another room nearby," Richard whispered to Narcissa. Her glance flitted to a nearby door, and he nodded minutely. He turned to Lucius. "Lucius, I think it best if you stay out here, all right? Keep everyone's focus away from that door, yes?" Lucius's eyes blazed in kinship for his friend. He knew he'd made the right choice, following Richard Granger into battle. "Yes, I can do that," he reassured him firmly. "Okay, then," Richard agreed. The blonde wizard walked away, and Richard turned to Linda, speaking quietly. "Stay with Lucius and help him out, all right?" Linda bit back a smile and nodded her agreement. Narcissa levitated the body towards the door, into the nearby room, and Richard was glad to see Lobo approaching from nearby, opening the door with his wand to allow the witch and her sizable burden entry. Richard and Lobo followed her and Voldemort's body in, and they were quickly joined by Tonks and Vulture. Vulture was the last into the room. She closed the door and turned to give Tonks and Lobo the inconspicuous hand gesture that each MI6 agent recognized that helped them identify themselves to each other. Lobo raised his wand and cast a non-verbal Muffliato spell on the room. "He's not actually dead?" he asked Richard. "No. What shall we do?" Richard looked around the room at the small group gathered there. Linda and Lucius stood several feet outside the door, watching the ongoing celebration in front of them. "What do you think they're doing in there?" Lucius said quietly to her. "Hopefully ending this," Linda said through gritted teeth. "Nice work with the gun, by the way. Thank you for saving Richard's life, Lucius." Lucius nodded. "I feel that I got lucky back there. Richard thanked me and said that he was glad that I had a view to a kill. But to be entirely honest, I simply pointed the gun, did you call it? I just closed my eyes and hoped that I would hit Greyback and not Richard." Linda struggled with her panicked relief for a moment before she spoke. "Well, I suppose you must have a golden eye, then." Lucius nodded sagely. "Yes, I suppose so. Whilst I have you here alone, there's something else I wish to discuss. I feel that I owe you an apology, Lady Linda. I confess, I thought you were an assassin until today. I was mistaken." Linda smiled thinly, still trying to process the fact that her husband nearly died only moments ago. "It's all right, Lucius. Until today, I thought of you as a Nazi." Lucius gasped. "How did you know I was a Not?" Linda struggled to understand. "Lucius, exactly what are we talking about, just so we're on the same page?" "My mother's maiden name was Not. You said that you thought of me as a Not, see?" Linda closed her eyes for a moment, willing herself not to laugh. "I do see. Well, perhaps Narcissa mentioned it to me in passing, and that's how I knew." "Ah!" Lucius nodded, and turned to survey the room again. People were filling plates of food, and 2 matching Weasleys were tapping a keg of butterbeer. Potter was surrounded by admirers. In one corner, Draco and Hermione stood watching their friends celebrate with tired but relieved smiles. Hermione caught the eye of Linda and blew her a tiny kiss across the room. Linda pretended to catch it and put it in her pocket. Lucius turned back to her, one more question lingering in his mind. "Linda, do you think that Richard will render the Dark Lord legless?" She pretended to ponder the idea for a moment before answering. "No, I think he's going to kill him." "What should we do?" Richard asked the gathered group. "If he lives, he'll gather his followers again, perhaps turn new ones. If he isn't strong enough to do so, another wizard will eventually rise up and take his place. We'll never be able to be rid of him entirely," answered Lobo. Tonks and the others nodded their agreement. "But," Richard turned to Narcissa. "Out in the forest. Harry didn't actually die. Didn't Dumbledore tell us that the pot within Harry will live on anyway? At least until the boy dies of old age himself."
"Am I to assume that there were Horcruxes involved?" Lupin asked.
Narcissa gasped, and Tonks looked chagrined. "How did you figure it out?" Tonks asked.
"It's not every day that your wife and her friends conjure fiend fire, darling. There's only so many reasons you needed to use it to destroy a little metal cup," he noted softly.
"Is that what that cup was? A Horcrux?" Narcissa asked in shock. "I remember reading a bit about them. Minutiae."
"Afraid so," Tonks said ruefully.
"Then we need to kill him," Narcissa said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Here, today. So long as he is alive, the Wizarding World is in danger. He'll do everything he can to claw his way back, split himself again and again. If this vessel is dead, the final piece of his soul dies with Potter. Let Harry Potter live, and let die this bit of the Dark Lord."
"Then let's do it," Richard said, all business now. "Lobo, how effective is that silencing charm?"
"Decent, but not 100%. There are plenty out there who will still detect unusual sounds, even with it in place," the younger man said.
"Damn! I've got no silencer to muffle the sound," Richard bemoaned.
From across the room, Vulture cleared her throat.
"You young ones, always looking for the hardest solution?" she smiled. "Here."
She flourished her wand, conjuring a large pillow.
"Fold it in half, and wrap it around the gun. Keep it tightly wrapped as you fire. Close range to your target," Vulture instructed.
Richard pressed the cushioned gun to the stunned Voldemort's temple, exhaled out a deep breath, and fired twice. The pillow absorbed most of the sound, and the excited hubbub in the next room never ceased. Out in the great hall, Lucius and Linda gasped as a bit of the sound of 2 gunshots escaped the room behind them. Lucius abruptly began coughing theatrically, and Linda pounded him on the back in a show of helping. Withdrawing the pillow from what was left of Voldemort's head, it was immediately obvious that, on the one hand, the Dark Wizard was clearly dead, beyond any shadow of a doubt. But it was also immediately evident that he was killed by gunshot.
I think we can fix that, so it isn't so obvious. Aunt Narcissa?"
Tonks asked grimly. Narcissa swallowed hard and nodded. The 2 women set to work magically healing the wounds caused by the bullet. Vulture vanished the pillow, whilst Lobo scourgified the blood splatter on the sofa.
"Right. We're all agreed. No one talks of this, yes? As far as the rest of the Wizarding World is concerned, Harry Potter killed Voldemort, correct?"
Richard asked. Everyone murmured their fervent agreement. Narcissa left first to inform Linda and Lucius that the deed was done. After a brief hug and a few whispered words to each other, Lupin and Tonks followed.
"Vulture, I can't tell you how glad I am to see you again after all these years," Richard began.
"Danger Mouse, it's always a pleasure serving with you," Vulture answered, taking his proffered hand and pulling him into a hug. She leaned back, shaking his hand formally.
"Augusta Longbottom." "Richard Granger." "Ah, I've heard so much about your daughter over the years. And Hermione has mentioned Neville often as well. I'm glad to know he's grown into such a fine young man," Richard said.
"When all of this is over, Mouse, how about the 2 of us grab a pint and you can tell me exactly how you went from being on Her Majesty's service to becoming a Death Eater, yes? It was quite the spectre, wasn't it? Me, standing there with Voldemort and his crew?" Richard asked in amusement.
"I never thought I'd see the day," the older woman said.
"Never say never again," Richard quipped with a wry grin.
Augusta laughed.
"You'll never change, will you, Mouse?"
He smiled conspiratorially.
"Ah, geez, never. So, we'll meet up this Saturday for that pint, then? 8 o'clock at the Casino Royale."
She shook her head in pretend exasperation. "How does your poor wife put up with it?" she asked in mock despair.
Richard laughed. "MI6 might have given me a license to kill, but she knows that I prefer to kill 'em with comedy. Come on, I want to introduce her to you."
Augusta took Richard's arm, and they walked out together to join in the celebration.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.